The crackling sound of static filled the air, vibrating the walls of the conference room like a prelude to the inevitable storm. Captain Lila Mason stood rigid, her gloved fingers clenching the cold metal of the table, eyes fixed on the hollow screen in front of her. The dim glow from the screen painted her face in hues of red and blue, flickering with each word spoken from the other side. "And if you think for a second that humanity will simply lie down and take this," her voice was sharp, measured, "you've underestimated us." The alien warlord's response was a guttural laugh, one that echoed across the room with chilling arrogance. Jaxer, the ruler of the Vaurk Dominion, leaned forward, his face a grotesque mask of green skin and sharp fangs. His voice rumbled through the speakers, heavy with malice. "Your defiance is noted, Captain. But I assure you, it will be crushed just like the rest of your kind." Lila's grip on the table tightened, her knuckles white. This wasn't just a political negotiation, it was a warning. The Vaurk had just issued their ultimatum: submit or be obliterated. They had given humanity no room for diplomacy, no chance for survival under the yoke of their alien overlords. The war that had simmered for years was now a full-blown inferno. "Crushed?" Lila echoed, voice dripping with disdain. "You'll find humanity has a much different definition of crushed, Jaxer. You haven't met us at full force yet." The warlord's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "I intend to see just how much force you can muster. But know this, Captain, there will be no second chances. The Galactic Council has decreed your people to be expendable." Lila's mind raced, but she kept her face impassive, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't just about saving Earth. No, this was about proving humanity's worth to the universe. They had been underestimated for far too long. Before she could respond, a shadow moved in the doorway behind her, and the room's atmosphere shifted. A figure appeared, stepping into the glow of the holographic display. Lieutenant Harris, her right-hand officer, approached with grim news written all over his face. Lila knew something had gone terribly wrong. "Captain," Harris said, voice low and urgent, "we've intercepted a transmission. The Council, they've already made their decision. The Diplomat, Orin Carr, is dead." Lila's blood turned cold. Orin Carr had been humanity's last hope for peace, a voice of reason in a galaxy where reason was a rare commodity. A man who had spent years negotiating with the Vaurk to avoid war. But it wasn't just his death that struck her hard, it was the brutal, inhumane way the Vaurk had executed him. They hadn't just killed him. No, they had made a public spectacle of it. The holovid was already circulating among the Galactic Council. Orin Carr, bound and burned alive, his screams filling the silence of the arena. She stood up, her fists clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palms. The room seemed to shrink, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. "Lila," Harris said, his voice heavy with the gravity of the situation. "They burned him alive in front of the entire council." The words hit Lila like a punch to the gut. The Vaurk hadn't just destroyed a diplomat, they had sent a clear, brutal message. Humanity's hope for peace was gone. And now, there would be no stopping the war. Her hand rose, trembling, to the side of her neck, where a small communicator lay. It was connected to her command team. She took a steadying breath, knowing what she had to do. "Set the course," she ordered, her voice cold, each word carrying the weight of 1,000 soldiers ready to die for one cause. "We're going to war." The hollow screen flickered as the communication was severed. The last words from Jaxer still echoed in her mind, asterisk. "Expendable. Asterisk. Prepare for full engagement," she muttered under her breath, turning to Harris. "We can't afford to waste any time. Call in the reinforcements, and make sure the fleet is ready. We hit their stronghold before they even know we're coming." Harris nodded and turned to make the necessary arrangements. Lila's mind raced. The stakes had never been higher. Humanity, still recovering from decades of fractures and internal strife, was now being thrust into an all-out war. But she couldn't let fear control her. She had seen humanity's resilience firsthand, in the trenches, in the face of impossible odds. They would fight. They would stand. They would not let the blood of their diplomat be spilled in vain. Her fist slammed against the table with a sharp crack, as the first of the fleet's orders began transmitting to the fleet's AI. She wasn't a diplomat. She wasn't a negotiator. She was a soldier. And it was time to wage war. "Get me a secure channel to General Thorn," she barked. "Tell him to assemble every man and woman under his command. We need them all. And we need them now." Minutes later, the screen came to life with the face of General Thorn, his scarred face set in a grim line. "Captain Mason," Thorn's voice rumbled, low and steady. "We've been waiting for your orders. The fleet is yours." Lila's expression hardened, her gaze locked on the general's face. "They've executed Orin Carr. They've declared humanity expendable. We go to war, General. We don't wait for orders. We hit them first. We strike their stronghold and make sure they know one thing: humanity is not a species you mess with." Thorn's lips curled into a slight, knowing smile. "Understood, Captain? We've got their coordinates. Let's show them what happens when you cross the human race." As the transmission cut off, Lila took a deep breath, staring out the viewport as the stars stretched into lines of light. The battlefield was set. The war was inevitable. And humanity, once again, would make it stand. The door to the conference room slid open, and the quiet hum of the ship's engines reverberated through the metallic walls. Lila turned, her mind still running with strategy. But one thing was certain: no matter what the cost, humanity would make sure the Vaurk never forgot what happened when they killed one of their own. Her hand rested on the communicator again, ready to issue the final order. "Let's get ready," she said under her breath. "Humanity's fight for survival begins now." The void of space stretched endlessly before Captain Lila Mason as she stood at the front of the war room aboard the Exodus. Her eyes were focused on the tactical map of the Vaurk stronghold. A cluster of red dots flickered on the screen, each one representing a heavily fortified target. It was a delicate game they were playing. They couldn't afford to be careless. One wrong move, and humanity would be caught in a bloodbath. "Captain Mason," General Thorn's voice interrupted her thoughts. His image flickered on the comm screen. His brow was furrowed, his jaw clenched, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "Our fleet is ready to jump into the Vaurk system. But we've intercepted something strange." Lila's brow furrowed. "Strange? What do you mean, General?" "We've detected an anomaly," Thorn continued. "An unaccounted-for fleet movement. It's too synchronized. The Vaurk are not known for their strategic coordination. This could be a trap." Lila's pulse quickened. She had anticipated retaliation, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. "A trap? We don't know yet," Thorn replied. "But we've got to act fast. The Vaurk fleet is setting up a defensive perimeter around their homeworld. They're trying to box us in." The room around Lila seemed to close in on her. They had the element of surprise. They couldn't lose it. But if the Vaurk were ready, if they'd anticipated their move, if they'd known humanity would strike first, they could be walking into a massacre. "Time to find out," Lila muttered under her breath. She slammed her fist onto the table. "All ships, prepare for immediate jump. We're hitting them hard and fast. We won't give them time to react." The Exodus' engines roared to life, and Lila felt the familiar lurch of the FTL drive kicking in. She glanced out the viewport, her thoughts racing. It was one thing to talk about war, to plan and strategize. But once you jumped into the heart of enemy territory, once you crossed that line, there was no going back. They would either break the Vaurk's grip on the galaxy or die trying. "General," Lila said into her comm as the ship rocketed forward. "Do we have a window?" Thorn's voice crackled through the comm system, the tension in his tone unmistakable. "We're just about to jump into Vaurk space. But we've got incoming. The trap is closing fast." The hairs on the back of Lila's neck stood up. The timing was too precise. The Vaurk weren't just reacting, they were planning. This wasn't a fight, it was a game, and humanity had walked straight into the trap. "Prepare for battle," she ordered, her voice cold and commanding. The Vaurk want to play games? Fine. Let's show them who's in charge. The Exodus and its fleet materialized at the edge of the Vaurk system, the stars turning into streaks of light as they arrived. In the distance, the Vaurk homeworld loomed, a dark planet shrouded in the vastness of space. But instead of the expected emptiness, the fleet was met with a wall of red, thousands of Vaurk warships waiting for them, locked in position, ready to strike. Lila's heart skipped a beat as she scanned the battlefield. The enemy fleet was massive, an imposing wall of metal and destruction. They were ready. And yet humanity had the one thing the Vaurk didn't: determination. "We've got incoming!" shouted Lieutenant Harris, his voice tight with urgency. "Multiple Vaurk ships engaging. It's an ambush!" Lila's thoughts raced. They had no time to back out. The first shots fired from the enemy ships ripped through the silence, bright beams of energy cutting through the void. A deafening explosion echoed across the Exodus as the ship rocked under fire. "Return fire!" Lila barked. "All units, engage!" The Exodus' cannons erupted, sending waves of plasma in return. The shields flared to life, absorbing the first few blasts, but it was clear they weren't going to last long under the Vaurk's concentrated fire. "We've got a hole in our shields!" Harris called, his voice strained. "We can't keep taking this." Lila's eyes narrowed, scanning the enemy formation. The Vaurk weren't just attacking, they were trying to trap them, pushing them toward a central point. The Vaurk ships were slowly closing in, every move calculated, every shot designed to force them into a vulnerable position. They were already in the trap. "Pull back!" Lila shouted, slamming her fist on the console. "Recalculate course. We need to break out of this formation." The ship veered off course, engines straining under the pressure. The Exodus' fleet began to fall back, the Vaurk ships giving chase with unrelenting precision. But Lila knew it was a gamble. Running wouldn't win the war. And they weren't just running from the Vaurk, they were running from the truth. They had underestimated the enemy. Humanity wasn't the hunter here, they were the hunted. "General, we're in trouble," Lila said, her voice filled with a rare hint of doubt. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." On the other side of the comm, General Thorne's voice was steely, unwavering. "Captain, this isn't about fighting. This is about surviving. You need to get us out of this trap, or we'll be obliterated." Lila gritted her teeth. It was true. If they didn't get out of this, they'd lose everything. Not just the battle, everything. The war, the future of humanity. The galaxy would remain under the Vaurk's iron grip. She looked to Harris. "Initiate evasive maneuvers, maximum speed. Get us out of here." The ship lurched again as the engines fired at full power. The Exodus' shields flared one last time, absorbing another barrage of energy blasts. But Lila knew they wouldn't last much longer. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Vaurk ships paused. The assault stopped. Lila's eyes widened in disbelief as a new transmission came through, this one from Jaxer himself. "Captain Mason," Jaxer's voice echoed in the comm system. "You've proven yourself worthy of a response. But not in the way you expected. Your diplomat's death was the beginning of your extinction." Lila's hands gripped the armrests of her command chair, her heart pounding. This was the turning point. The Vaurk weren't just fighting, they were declaring their final move. Humanity had no choice now. They would have to fight not just for survival, but for vengeance. And there was no turning back. The roar of battle filled the cold emptiness of space. The Exodus shuddered under another wave of fire as the Vaurk fleet closed in. The tactical screens flashed with data, damage reports, incoming fire, an account of how many ships were left in their fleet. It was a dwindling number. The enemy was relentless, cutting them off at every turn, pressing harder with each passing moment. Lila Mason stood at the front of the war room, her eyes locked on the holo display, calculating their options. The Vaurk were closing in faster than they had anticipated. They'd underestimated how organized their enemy was. They were in a corner, trapped between two lines of fire, and there was no way out without suffering heavy losses. Shields at 23%, Captain, Harris said, his voice tight with worry. We can't take another hit like that. Lila's jaw clenched. They were running out of time and options. The Exodus was an advanced warship, but even it had limits. The fleet had already sustained critical damage. But what could they do? What strategy would break them out of this infernal trap? Get me General Thorne, Lila ordered. A moment later, Thorne's image appeared on the comm screen, his face as hard and grim as ever. We're still fighting, Captain. But we're not going to last long unless you have a plan. Lila's hand slammed against the edge of the table. Her mind was racing. This was it, the final moment. If they didn't act now, they would lose everything. She had to take a risk. A big one. General, we're going to make a play for their command ship, Lila said, her voice calm, but sharp. It's the only way to turn this around. Thorne's eyes widened. That's suicide. If we try for the command ship, we're walking straight into their strongest defenses. I know, Lila replied. But if we can take it down, we cripple their entire fleet. It's the only way to win this. There was a long pause. The weight of her words hung in the air. The stakes had never been higher. You're right, Thorne finally said. I'll rally the remaining fleet. If we're going to do this, we'll need everyone in position. But don't make any mistakes, Mason. If you miss, it's over. Lila's eyes narrowed. I don't plan on missing. The Exodus surged forward, breaking through the Vaurk lines with a fury. The crew braced as the warship's engines roared to life, throwing them toward the heart of the Vaurk fleet. Their remaining ships followed closely behind, like a pack of wolves in pursuit of their prey. Lila stood at the helm, every nerve in her body strung tight. They were about to plunge headlong into the jaws of death. But she was ready. They had no other choice. Full speed ahead, she ordered. Take us in, right into the heart of their fleet. The ship's thrusters ignited, and the Exodus rocketed forward, cutting through the chaos. Enemy fire came at them from all sides, but Lila's hand remained steady on the controls, guiding them through the hail of plasma bolts. Their shields flared with each impact, but they held firm, just barely. Brace for impact! Harris shouted, his voice barely audible over the noise. Lila's heart raced. The Vaurk command ship loomed ahead, massive and foreboding. It was their target, and their salvation. If they could disable it, the entire Vaurk fleet would fall apart. But getting there would be the hardest part. It was surrounded by hundreds of Vaurk warships, all armed and ready. Deploy the strike teams, Lila barked. We'll hit them from all sides. Harris, coordinate with Thorne, get the flanks covered. Yes, ma'am, Harris replied. The strike teams boarded their assault pods, launching from the Exodus with precision. They cut through the void like missiles, streaking toward the enemy's flagship, their target locked. Every soldier aboard knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was for vengeance. As the Exodus continued its deadly plunge, the assault pods collided with the Vaurk command ship's defenses. Explosions rocked the hull of the flagship as the pods hit their mark, embedding themselves deep into the ship's armor. The Vaurk scrambled to respond, but the human strike teams were already inside, tearing through the corridors with deadly efficiency. Lila watched as the display flickered, showing the progress of the assault. It was going well, but she knew it wouldn't last. The Vaurk weren't going to give up their command ship without a fight. And the longer the strike teams stayed in the heart of enemy territory, the greater the risk. Keep pushing forward, Lila ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. We can't stop now. But then, a warning blared across the bridge. Captain, we've got Vaurk reinforcements incoming, Harris shouted. They've called in their reserves. We're going to be surrounded. Lila's mind raced. The reinforcements were the last thing they needed, and their chances of getting to the command ship were slipping. They had one shot at this. She couldn't let it fail. Status on the command ship? She demanded. It's weakening, Harris replied, his voice tense. We've hit their main reactor, core breach imminent. But we're running out of time. Lila's gaze hardened. This was it. They were close, but they still had to make it to the heart of the Vaurk fleet before it was too late. Then, the unthinkable happened. The Vaurk flagship trembled violently, and the sound of cracking metal reverberated through the bridge. Harris's voice cracked over the comms. "Captain, they've lost power! The flagship is going down!" Lila's heart skipped a beat. They had done it. The flagship was no longer a threat. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet. "Keep fighting!" Lila yelled, her voice filled with renewed fire. "We finish this now!" With the flagship's fall, the rest of the Vaurk fleet began to falter. Their coordination shattered. The remaining ships broke formation, and humanity's fleet seized the opportunity. The tide had turned. Lila's hands flew across the console, issuing commands directing her fleet to pick off the remaining Vaurk ships. One by one, the enemy warships fell. The battle that had seemed so hopeless moments ago was now turning into a sweeping victory. Hours later, as the last of the Vaurk warships retreated into the depths of space, Lila stood alone on the bridge of the Exodus. Her eyes lingered on the view of the shattered Vaurk fleet, now floating in the silence of space. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. "General Thorne," Lila said, breaking the silence. "Captain Mason." Thorne's voice came through the calm, weary but victorious. "You did it. Humanity did it." Lila's eyes narrowed, her thoughts turning inward. The galaxy had just seen what humanity was capable of. But the fight was far from over. The Vaurk had declared war, but humanity had proven it wasn't done fighting. "Not yet," Lila replied, her voice steady. "We're just getting started." The stars stretched ahead of them, an endless expanse. Humanity had taken its first step toward reclaiming the galaxy, and there was no turning back.